Miriam, Imogen, Jay, unmute yourself, please. I will just briefly introduce you and then it's over to you. I hope you had a bit of a chance to listen into Skina. So first thing I'm going to do is to thank Skina, who was, as usual, fantastic. And I welcome Miriam, whose last image I remember was on top of a tank somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Miriam and Imogen and Jay, and we are absolutely delighted to have you with us. And I know that the write-up I did for you on the website didn't quite do you justice, but I had to kind of push you into one um, basket almost. So I will introduce you like this, but please say something more once it's over to you. So I'm introducing those three amazing young women, which will Imogen will immediately say, I'm not that young, but I'm
Build that
introducing these
heart.
amazing young and courageous women, Jay, Miriam, and Imogen, um, which are basically HS2 activists, have been heavily involved in the HS2 Rebellion, and have been on the ground for quite some time within HS2 XR, the Stonehenge resistance, where I met, of course, Miriam briefly. She might not remember me, and definitely Jay. Um, and Imogen, who is also on tech strike. There's more to all three of them. If they want to mention that, they can do that in a moment. And as a group, they probably best known as being part of the famous Seven Sisters. Um, these seven women who did a direct action to save this 200-year-old oak tree from the chainsaws of HS2, then were, of course, taken to court and then were not convicted, which brought with it quite a celebration within the activist scene. So they were the first people. Later on, of course, we had the Shell 7, I think, who the jury didn't convict. And now, unfortunately, we have the 9 highway people who have been convicted to prison sentences. But those three were part of the Seven Sisters. So all of them will talk about their experiences as earth activists on the ground. And I'm taking my hat off, and I think so will you after you have heard them. As far as I know, and that's just as far as I know, Jay will talk about the Seven Sister Oak action. She will start us off. Miriam will talk about the eviction and the court case, and hopefully about the moment when she jumped on a tank, which, which was an image which flew around social media. And then Imogen will also talk on, among other things, about her tech strike. So welcome to you, amazing women. And I will disappear now and leave the screen to you. And Jay, or whoever wants to start, just start chattering.
Thank you, Krista.
Thank you, Krista. Hello, beautiful people. So we're here today from the front lines of UK climate activism to talk about our direct action experiences. To start by apologising if this feels scripted. Public speaking, not my thing, so I've written it down. Joined today, obviously, Mims and Imogen. My name is Jai, and I've been a climate activist for 2 years now. We're truly honoured to be invited to speak here today. It's massive. I'd like to talk to you about an action that we did together, an action that has bonded these seven sisters for life, some of whom had never even met before this day, myself and Mims included. The action temporarily stopped the felling of a beautiful single ancient oak we call the Seven Sisters oak tree. But before I begin, I'd like to give you all a little background on HS2 for those who are not already aware. HS2 is the new high-speed rail project set to span a large portion of England's ever rarer countryside. This is no ordinary railway. With no stops in between London Euston and Birmingham City Airport, this train is for the elite business people to get from London to Birmingham and back again, just a little quicker. However, every element of this train line is shrouded in lies, deceit, and corruption at the highest levels, from ecological devastation to environmental disasters, including the loss of 1,600 cubic meters of bentonite. That's over 53 lorries worth. Bentonite is a pollutant, providing its own toxicity. It also collects and carries deposits of heavy metals from the chalk into the water table, compounding its effect. This they lost into the chalk aquifer, which feeds 22% of London's drinking water. That's 3.5 million people's drinking water. This error alone is worthy of a documentary. To elderly residents being violently removed from their homes, including multiple cases where the intimidation by HS2 and their agents was so severe it's caused heart attacks, strokes, and even suicides. To ever-changing economic reports, having started at an estimated 37 billion, it's now well above 108 billion pounds and increasing. This is public money, while the NHS, along with other public services, drowns, and several lucky corporations line their pockets under the cloak of boosting the economy. To information and data usage, including disappearing live streams and barristers' emails being hacked. I run the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist here, but these are facts. This project increasingly shows no intention of playing by the rules, either ethical or legal. The site we were on was Pause Peace Conservation Project in Buckinghamshire, one of the Stop HS2 protest camps and one of few success stories. Pause Peace is a special site to us for several reasons. It may seem to be an insignificant stretch of woodland, a small coppice wood planted centuries ago, sandwiched in between two farms. However, it has a powerful history. Originally 3 times larger than it stands today, Pause Peace was planted specifically to provide free fuel for the poorer of the local residents. Collectively owned, managed, and shared, this woodland is a symbol for hope and prosperity. It also homes red kites, tawny owls, badgers, 2 species of bat, along with many other creatures and some plants, including white woodland anemone and ferns. These are special, both indicators of ancient forest flora. This site also gave us the opportunity to work with landowners who would normally, and out on the streets, have been much closer to our opposition than our allies. Yet, a few crusties and a staunch Tory landowner and businessman got the opportunity to really see each other and to hear each other's truth. Although these relationships tend to be fragile and regularly turbulent, I think they are one of the more powerful parts of our work on the front lines, dispelling common myths and finding common ground on both sides. Myself and Imogen, with the help of others, had dropped a camp on this site just a month or so before this action took place, specifically with the intention of holding a women-led, safe space where actions we took could be rooted in spiritual and nature connection. On the day of the action, we awoke that morning with just myself and Imogen on site. A series of pure synchronicities led to there being enough people on site when they came for the tree. There had been a shout out for solidarity support for a community issue that was happening on a different site close to us, which led to the influx of people that made this possible. With no plan, no organisation, and no idea what was about to happen, everybody rushed into action as the climate changer started moving. Over the course of the first few hours, we gathered a collection of activists and locals, the majority of whom stayed on the footpath. One by one, people came to join myself and Imogen under the tree, while the ecologist was trying to complete his final survey. This crowd was semi-transient for a little while, with people coming and going, and then organically settled at 7. We hadn't even realised that this was the case until much later on in the day. For me, this tree was just a step too far, and I was strong in my resolve that it wasn't actually needed. Right on the edge of the land, across a small verge from the main body of the compound, it didn't look like it was on their land, and it was being felled purely for the public footpath, which was already in situ, just a few metres to the left. So we sat, 7 sisters, and we sang. Hands held along the line of resistance, with Imogen being the first to sit, with her other hand holding the root of a tree. One by one, we decided we were going to hold our ground. The crowd of locals and support crew continued to grow, with cameras on all sides documenting the events of the day. With the machinery just in the background, waiting for its chance. For me, the power and connection I felt that day was almost overwhelming. A tangible flow of energy threw us into the tree and back again. The most striking thing about this day for me was the police response. With no chains or physical barriers, all they seemed to feel able to do was repeatedly, politely ask us to leave, which of course we ignored, or replied with our single demand: show us the bat license that allows them to fell an ancient oak, a bat roost, in the middle of spring. We held this space with the help of the crowd across the verge that we were sitting in all day, until eventually, at about 4:30, 45 police officers in squad formation came to remove these 7 singing women from their post. We continued to sing as we were removed in line from the base of the tree, and we continued to sing all the way to the police station. Later on, in the cells, I heard a tune I recognised. I pressed my face to the door and to hear it. One of the sisters had started to sing. I listened, desperately trying to make out the words, waiting till I could join in. Then another voice piped up on the other side of the custody suite, and another somewhere else. I joined in, now able to hear, and we sang together. It'd been a turbulent night in the cells that evening, with a few rowdy drunks brought in, and I noticed the background noise settling down. Then other voices started to join us, picking up the tune, some managing, some not so much, but every voice that I could hear felt powerful, and I could feel the energy of the whole place lifting. I slept like a baby that night, and we were all full of energy when we came out in the morning. We were eventually charged with aggravated trespass and Section 241 of the Trade Unions Act, and we were released the next day. We were given a host of bail conditions, including not to interfere with the working operations of HS2. HS2 were given a date to submit their evidence sometime in the future, but no evidence came. Instead, on the day of the deadline, they came back for the tree. It was felled with only a few protectors on site, unable to do anything to stop them. One rebel, however, managed to gather through the fence a branch with exactly 7 acorns attached. We have one each. Felling this tree, we can only imagine, was a statement. Somehow, the case still made it to court. Having lost the charge of Section 241 somewhere along the way, we gathered for a 3-day trial. In the courtroom, we finally realised how ridiculous this case was, as HS2 tried to submit new evidence at 9 a.m. on the first day of the trial through a prosecution barrister who clearly had no idea what she had signed up for. This evidence caused a ruckus that ate part of the morning before it was deemed inadmissible. However, this evidence would not have made a difference. There were 2 pieces of evidence still missing, 2 pieces that they had been asked for at the start. These were simply the ecology report, a legal requirement, and the evidence of whether or not the tree was even on HS2 land. After some desperate attempts for the prosecution to gather the evidence, the judge, eventually, at about lunchtime on day 1 of a 3-day trial, declared us innocent. We suspect that the evidence was held back as it would have shown this tree was a maternity roost. Although we were unable to prove it, we had seen bat activity. We also believe that the tree was not on HS2 land, and they did not have the relevant rights to fell. The main takeaway from this, however, for me, was the impact that this action had in terms of media and public perception of the campaign. This action and its reach has led to an influx of people from all over the country, which allowed for a fresh community to come in and win the battle for Paul's peace. After a brutal eviction, HS2 have only taken the front face of the woods, around 7 meters, but have left the rest intact. This is a much smaller chunk than they originally wanted. So it seems it doesn't matter what you do. When something doesn't feel right, all that matters is you do something. You never know the impact it might have. I'm now going to pass you over to our beautiful sister Mims, who's going to talk a little bit more about this.
Thank you. You're amazing. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here today. I am feeling very honoured. I've seen some familiar faces, which is really lovely. So yeah, my name is Miriam. I am an eco-social butterfly. I try to involve myself and be present in movements across the country and internationally to bring a different world around, a world that's centered on a connection to nature, a connection to each other, and liberation. So yeah, so I got involved in the HS2 campaign. Kind of, I was on the sidelines watching for a while, seeing things play out. The most striking moment I can remember was seeing an amazing tree at Crackley Woods fall to the ground, and it was biblical. It felt like there was this earth-shattering, literally, moment of power. It was scary, and from that moment I knew that I wanted to engage. And a little bit prior, I had been involved just online, in the online side, in a group called Risky Business, which was centered around highlighting HS2's illegality across the country, whether that be the land rights issue, whether that be the lack of proper licensing, whether that be the brutalizing of peaceful protesters. We wanted it to be seen by the world, and at least by the UK scene. So Risky Business was on Zoom. We were having meetings and we thought of hashtags, and we got kind of press releases out, and I think out of that HS2 Rebellion was born. I may be wrong because the whole thing was a blur, but anyway, so HS2 Rebellion kind of came out of this little collection of people just in lockdown. So really, from then, I wanted to get to the ground. I wanted to be involved where the action was happening, really. So I went to Crackley Woods and I met Indra, and later on we as the weeks went on, we connected to each other. The crew at Crackley were just beautiful. We checked in with each other in the morning, and we meditated, and we did yoga, and we talked about how the pandemic had affected, and we talked about how disconnected we felt from each other. And I think that's a really big part of the HS2 campaign and movement for me, is the reconnection to nature and the reconnection to each other after the separation for so long. So on the day of the action, we all bundled into a minibus. It was this like bouncy kind of bus that we were pretty lucky, I think, to have on the campaign for the length we did. It was, yeah, it was precarious, but we all got into the bus, and the atmosphere on the way down was kind of electric. We were all super excited. It felt like summer camp, but with slightly more risk. So we pulled up to Pause Peace, and immediately I just felt overwhelmed with how beautiful the land was there. The ground was soft to walk on. The clover fields were so rich and in fruit. It was amazing. And there were lambs in the corner, and it was just like a little patch of heaven, of Eden. And I just felt really calm, but I also knew we were there to kind of help out. And so we kind of must have been there for a few minutes when I heard Jai say that they're going for the tree. It was actually more of a shout down the lane, and we all just started running. There wasn't a communication really amongst each other. We just heard a call for help and we ran towards it. I think I remember there being some security and maybe a few police there that day, but I saw the field was pretty much open. There was like a wooden kind of fence on either side, and I thought, we can walk through that. It's an open land. And we did. We walked past the police, and we kind of grouped together by this, and before actually, as we walked up, we saw this beautiful oak tree. It was really striking. It kind of sat by strong and tall. So I saw this tree, and in amongst the kind of leaves, I saw an orange figure. And HS2, the campaign, we have a really passionate connection to the security. We kind of we know they're on our side slightly. They do have an endearing name, and we call them carrots. So we saw a carrot up the tree. Connecting to nature, of course. We saw a carrot up the tree, and we saw him poking around, and we knew that the bats could be roosting in there. We also know that previously HS2 had not had a bat license. So we were kind of flowing together. It was a very, very beautiful moment. There wasn't a lot of each other. There was conversation and communication with the security and the police on the ground. But as the day went on, we started to move more like a formation. And I think it's really important to note that I had never met Gyro Imogen before. I'd probably maybe seen them on the periphery, but I had never met them before. But something that I did know completely is that I could trust them. I trusted that their hearts and their intentions were in the right place. And so we sat down by the tree, and we started singing, and we sang, and we sang, and we sang, and time just started to fade. It was like the moment there was so powerful. It was so grounded. We were so together that we knew what we were doing we knew we were in the right place. And I remember when I did finally get picked up by the coppers, my eyes were closed. I'd just been singing for hours and hours, and one by one everyone had been taken, and I continued to sing. I continued to sing as we walked down the lane. I continued to sing as we waited for the van. I continued to sing in the cell, as we all did. It's a moment I'll never forget, and we did inevitably save that tree and that ecosystem, that interconnected home of millions of life forms, for 3 long months in the summer. And we don't know what the ripples of that moment can be. We can't predict that. We can't see that far. But I know that it was magnificent. And like Jai said before about the evictions, and the evictions unfortunately are a really nasty part of the HS2 campaign. They are a symbol of basically what has got us to this place. Humans that are connected or intertwined with an environment are ripped away from it, are separated violently from it. And the evictions, they're traumatic. I unfortunately, we have to be honest with that. The separation from ourselves and from the environment in that moment does create trauma. And a big part of where we move forward, how we can heal and carry on, is how we can come back to ourselves and collectively move forward. And that's something that I really liked hearing Skeena say before about how we can stay present. I think that's really important. So I've seen I've been part of many evictions on the HS2 campaign. And I also heard Krista talk about my jumping on the truck at Dicey, and actually the relevance of that is that the things that I identify as problems in the world, the imperialism and colonialism of the destruction of nature within ourselves and the materials we make, me jumping on a Jeep that's heading towards an arms fair is actually very similar to my action that I did to sit by a tree, because I know that if I can get my body in the way of harm occurring, of nature being destroyed, of people being displaced and disconnected from one another, that's my role. That is my journey in this space. But yeah, the evictions are troubling. Pause Peace eviction was one of the most incredible, ridiculous, beautiful moments that I will never ever forget, because we knew the ridiculousness of the moment, seeing the separation of literally them putting up a barrier, a fence between us and them. We could see how distressed they were. We were having a laugh, we were dancing, we were singing, we were shouting, we were exclaiming our love for the place, and it felt like a temple. It felt like a spiritual place, even though it probably did sound a little ridiculous, and there was some strange singing. On one of the towers, we make towers in the trees to protect them. So we build around the trees. We kind of make little homes just around the trees. And one of the towers was called SpongeBob, because of a SpongeBob. I think it was like a towel or something. There was a SpongeBob face. We don't ask too many questions, but the elation we felt and the connection we felt to each other was completely memorable and sacred. It really was. And we saved a section of the woods. It previously, before in the year, the Euston Tunnelers did an incredible job of bringing the campaign to an international, global scale. Swampy, our friend Dan, has also recently taken part in the Wendover Active Resistance camp eviction, where he also spent time, as many other beautiful souls did, down in the kind of chalk tunnels. And it's not easy. It's really, really not easy. This is a constant battle of our minds and our bodies, and at times it can be incredibly difficult. But the community that we build with each other and the solidarity we have with each other, the young people that are rising up and reclaiming our future and ourselves in that. I spoke a little bit when we were talking about what I'd say. I remember thinking that the connection or the beauty I saw in nature on the HS2 campaign, that I'd spent some time in lockdown kind of being disconnected from myself, but then connecting to nature. It was seeing myself as part of that, seeing myself as part of nature, made me enjoy and love myself in ways that I hadn't experienced before. And I know a lot of young people have felt the same. We are feeling so grateful to have finally had a window into a world that we've been disconnected from for so long. So yeah, I mean, we did save that tree, and we have made so many beautiful sacred spaces across the campaign, up and down, and that isn't over. There is opportunity for folks to still get involved in that, and I welcome you to, and I encourage you to, because we are making sacred spaces. Yeah. So I'll pass on to my wonderful sister Imogen. Thank you very, very, very much.
Amazing, Miriam. Thank you. Hello everyone. I am Imogen, and ultimately I joined the HS2 Stop HS2 campaign after watching the atrocities of what was happening unfold online for a long, long time. I am a parent to two girls, 15 and 23. And I hadn't been able to get to the campaign because of being a mum. and everything that brings. But my daughter, my 15-year-old, was at her father's during the pandemic, and I had no work because of the pandemic. And so I was watching the campaign unfold online, and after seeing the last tree at Crackley fall from my sofa, I needed to be with them. I needed to be with those on the front line. So with limited resources, I looked to my local Extinction Rebellion group to ask them if they would help fund a trip to the campaign, and they agreed. And so nervously, excitedly, I didn't know what to expect. I took the bare minimum camping because what I was viewing online were evictions, and I didn't know whether I'd land straight into that. And I went to Crackley at first, didn't know anybody, put my tent up and was invited into a beautiful community of people, still recovering from the eviction, but the camp was still there, still holding on. I think it's still there now, parts of it, but people have moved on to other places. And so this journey for me filled a long gap of not being an activist. I've been an activist since my teens, but became a parent in my mid-20s and put everything on the back burner to be a parent. I'm a single mum, have been for 18 years. And I needed to get back into it with seeing the world the way it was going, and then didn't know which way to go. But then I discovered Exile and this beautiful community and these wonderful friends. And that gave me hope, gave me purpose again, understanding that there were other people fighting for what we were fighting for in the world. So I went up to the campaign, and my time on the HS2 campaign brought real change and focus for me for challenging the system that I had seen as failing us for so many years. I'd lived within that system as a single parent and was only too aware of how the system fails us. The Seven Sisters Oak became a deep symbol for us. When that tree was felled, when our beautiful oak tree was felled some months after our action to try and save her, it left us all bereft. Many people on the campaign and other campaigns throughout the world are often in a state of burnout, continuous burnout, because the need to step up and be there, but not being properly supported from the background to be able to be healed through that process. And so when that experience hit me, the grief sent me on a deep healing process. And through that, I grew. Thankfully, it was a real deep journey. And I began to develop a deepening in my understanding of what is needed to change the paradigm we live, which is ultimately love. Recognition for the reasons why those who create harm, why they do what they do, allowed me to come from a focused place of love and healing. It brought real weight to my understanding of the world we live in today, and also my council tax strike. So I decided when my bill arrived in 2019 to find out what this £100 a month was being spent on by my council, and it didn't really add up, the figures didn't add up. And being aware that often they use public spending or taxpayers' money to pay fund development, road development, more cars, more ways for people to move in the world through vehicles, and the weight of the climate crisis on my shoulders, I thought, okay, what would happen if I just withhold my council tax and explain to them it's in climate and no social protest? Nothing happened for a while until I was summoned to court in 2019. I went to court, accepted my liability, explained that this valuable resource wasn't being used as what its intention was, and that was community resilience and services, and was fined £60 and sent away. Didn't pay my bill, and then the virus hit and nothing happened in that year. And then I went to court this year again, and the same thing happened again. And since then, nothing has happened. I've had various bailiff letters through my letterbox. They just go in the recycling. I had a bailiff visit my house, and he filmed me while I filmed him, and I explained to him what I was doing, and he took some notes and went away again. And the council don't really know where to put me. And now I lost my job because of the virus, as I said, so I had to claim universal credit and sign on for the first time in 20 years, which is very daunting. But in effect, that makes my protest null and void because I don't have to pay. But it's still going through the process, and it's still a vital resource, and inspired by tax rebellion globally in the past, and how tax rebellion has changed systems. And it's bringing an understanding for me, what would happen if that resource stayed within the community that generated that money, and the people working with the councillors, town councillors, parish councillors, worked together to decide where that money was best spent. And that process has actually started in the town where I live, which is really beautiful. So that was the council tax. Going back to the campaign, to be a full-time, I returned from the campaign after spending 7 months there. In that time, I lived in the woodlands in Paws Peace and at Jones Hill Wood, and really began to understand working with community and living in community, and how important that is to us as people, not only in this country, but on a global. And that in turn led me to look at our Indigenous communities and their plights and the highlight of their pain as they try and protect the lands, the sacred lands and the communities, and from mass corporate destruction. And also I had the opportunity to deepen my knowledge of ecology and understand the symbiotic relationships between plants, animals, insects, and us living there as a community. It was a very beautiful and powerful thing. And it made me understand deeply that within our own community, within the UK, there is little within our culture that calls us to connect to the natural world. We lost our Indigenous roots generations ago, and all of us have grown up disconnected from the land in our so-called developed society. Therefore, we have no real identity, and because of this, we still cling to the outdated class system, which we have long outgrown, unable to stand our ground and heal from the damage we have inflicted and continue to inflict. The damage that others inflicted upon us many, many generations ago, stamping our mark throughout the world in violence and greed, abusing others as we ourselves has been abused, and to this day carry those deep patterns within our systems. So on returning home after the campaign, to be a full-time mum again to my daughter, who was then 14, my work turned towards nature connection and nurture in an attempt to break those patterns, teaching the next generation the importance of self-care and learning coping strategies through their connection with nature, in the hope that the ripples spiral out into the wider community. As a little girl myself, I was often ridiculed by my peers and siblings for wanting to just be alone in the natural world, a strange being feeling more at home among the trees and water than anywhere else. So I soon learned to hide that side of myself as a form of protection. I came to believe that I was different and would never fit into the norms of society that I grew up in. But this experience made me who I am. And for that, I'm extremely grateful, eternally grateful, as I am to all of these wonderful activists and all of these speakers who come from a deep place of understanding and a place from the heart. And knowing this passionate community, I feel empowered in my actions. Being on the HS2 campaign, I finally began to understand who I am for the first time, I believe, since I was a child. Finding once again that little girl who was shunned for her love of nature and bringing her into the forefront of my existence, where she guides me every day alongside my own children. My time living in the woods was when I really connected with her. She was having an amazing time, climbing trees, sleeping in tree houses, cooking on an open fire, living in community, waking to the dawn chorus after sleeping in a hammock, seeing the stars glitter in the night sky, connecting with the creatures and the plants. It was amazing. And the simple joy of just being under a canopy as your roof. Spending my time living at Paul's Peace and at Jones Hill Woods, two of the camps along the route. Not only did I understand deeply and learn deeply about connecting with our inner community, but about the wider community which supported the camps, providing us with food, building materials, bedding, clothes, and much needed moral support, learning about ecology and biodiversity through the wonderful independent ecologists that were brought in to the campaign when we recognized we needed our own evidence, because the HS2 ecologists trained at the HS2 Academy were simply not doing what we knew was the right thing to do. So these wonderful people offered their time and their beautiful expertise. And that would have been our evidence there in court. But unfortunately, we didn't get the opportunity to do that. So learning through this wonderful extended community, I came to an understanding that without that support from the wider community, defense of what is threatened wouldn't be possible, and how the global movement of the exposure of the plight of our indigenous cultures has triggered me to look at my own heritage more deeply. As I said before, none of us really know who we are. Whilst living in Jones Hill Woods, the community made prayer times, taking a pinch of ash from our fire, the heartbeat of our community, and placing the ash in cloths, offering a honoring to people that worked and lived the land before, and asking them for protection. We made many of these prayer ties and we placed them around the woodland, deepening our sacred connection with the land and the land spirits and our ancestors. This brought us to hold ceremony within the woodland, marking the turning of the wheel, the changing of the seasons. And it was a lovely thing to do. And it brought other people in pilgrimage to understand, people walking from wider communities to understand the plight of the woods. And that in turn, through its exposure, rippled out into the community and gave those people that felt that this, what we have to remember is this development had been going on for 12 years before I was even aware of the campaign, and many of us were aware of the campaign. And then the communities living around the development had been living with this for such a long time, and they had tried to campaign in the beginning, but their voices weren't being heard and there wasn't any hope for them. And seeing what we were doing started to give the wider community a greater hope. And so they started their own little things and started to connect with the people living in the camps. And it was a beautiful and powerful thing. And I believe truly that the weight of those actions throughout the campaign, we had the Rebel Trail walk from Birmingham up in Crackley, all follow the route all the way through to London, and the beautiful people that we met that joined that because they were inspired by what was happening in the campaign. Those people stayed. We had wonderful Satchel, Will, who stayed in Jones Hill Wood. He didn't continue his walk the rest of it. He loved the community in the woodlands so much, he stayed there. And he was heavily involved in the eviction at Jones's. And he's just emerged from a tunnel at Wendover Active Resistance Camp. And he's a beautiful soul. And I saw him arrested on an action that we did in Wendover, jumped on by 7 police officers because he tried to hand a cup of coffee to somebody across a barrier of police. And others there, we were just trying to give them some food, the people in Lock-on some food. This was a usual occurrence within actions on the campaign. And we were just trying to give them some sustenance, and the police pulled us away and threw us on the floor. But Will, our wonderful person of colour, which hit the press and everyone was completely outraged by this, was set upon. He actually had 7 police officers. One of them had his knee on the back of his neck, and we were screaming and shouting, and he was made to remove his knee, and we just didn't understand, and that sent such trauma and ripples throughout that day. I didn't mean to speak about that, but that's come out. But other people are so inspired by what's been happening, and this inspires people to act against corruption within their own communities, and the understanding that this is happening with all communities throughout the world and in our country. It's deepened people's resolve. And I'll get back on track. So just touching back on our beautiful time at Paul's Peace, where the oak tree stood. For me, the understanding of the nature of our connection with nature, and where this campaign has led me to deepen my work. I have started turning my garden into a place where children, young adults in particular, and those working through trauma can connect deeply with nature, harnessing their own potential through a connection with nature. I have a 1/4 acre of garden which hasn't been touched for 20 years until I moved here 4 years ago. So I have been working on that land without power tools. It doesn't feel right to bring in power tools. Digging, getting close to the earth, scratching my limbs with brambles, and really connecting with this little piece of land that is sandwiched in between houses, the high street, and housing developments around. And it's a real haven, it's a real sanctuary in this busy town where I live. And I'm about to embark upon using that land to help young people connect to the natural world, because without that connection, we have nothing. And the cases of anxiety and self-harm and mental health issues are rising so dramatically within our younger community that this is something very much needed. And this, without going to the campaign, I wouldn't understand and feel the need to do this deep work. I have the local school wanting to be involved. I've got the local community wanting to be involved. And so its intention is to open up windows in their minds to understand how nature can help them move forward in this frightening world that we're stepping into. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to lead me on this path, because this is my purpose. This is a deep, deep purpose for me. And I have great importance, understanding that also without my sacred connection, I wouldn't understand how to do this gently. I started my sacred connection about 7 years ago. I've been working with myself, and I discovered a beautiful healing process called creative kinesiology a couple of years ago. And that has led me to understand connection with Earth, how we are connected, we are one, connection with my guides, my ancestors. And actually, through this powerful process, I've healed and grown deeply. And during our court case, our long-awaited court case, as we were listening to the judge and our prosecution, I sat and I prayed for the opening of the heart of our judge and our prosecution. And I called in guidance from the spirits of communication and justice. And I called in healing and protection from the trees that had been lost to the development. And for me, there was a moment where the courtroom, the energy shifted and the courtroom felt light and cool as the woodland does. And it was literally seconds, and it was beautiful. And next thing, we were being sent home in a few hours into a trial that was scheduled to last for 3 days. And it was a joyous, joyous win for us and the campaign at that time. But on reflection later, when we were together celebrating, we were talking about how we hadn't had our opportunity to stand up and express and talk about the legalities, show them our evidence that this tree may not have even been on HS2 soil, claimed soil. And so we came to understand that now there are over 300 cases like this within the HS2 campaign alone. People who have not had the opportunity to stand up and speak their truth in a court of law. So where did that leave us? Understanding that the judicial system within this country doesn't work to serve us, or more importantly, our ecology, our natural world. And this in turn may lead to other campaigns, and it connects us to other cultures through this growing movement of conscientious earth protectors who are all walking in the same path to protect nature and ultimately our survival as a human species. So with that in mind, I would like to just reflect on this time, the last couple of years. For me, the year 2020 was a real year of seeing, of awakening. All of these issues coming to the forefront of everybody's vision. So many corrupt developments and so much damage being exposed to the point where it became impossible to be ignored by us as a society who, even though we know it's there, are still not able to recognize what we must do to stop this corruption. So 2020 was 2020 vision for me. And then in 21, the virus came and people's lives were changing so dramatically. Love lost, lives lost, homes, jobs, forcing us to change in many ways. Issues coming to the surface, making us look at our lives and deal with the many consequences of moving through life in a world without care. A time of deep transition, a time for shedding and clearing out the old, which no longer serves us, leading us to 2022, ready for the real work to begin. Spending the 7 months living in the woodlands threatened by the HS2 development allowed me to get the hard activists out of my system. It brought me deep focus on what my purpose is. Working on a local level to create change, working within a local community and in harmony with the natural world. Looking to Indigenous cultures to learn how their communities work in harmony and applying those teachings to our own. And through this, I have begun working within community and others. We're holding people's assemblies or community conversations within my town, asking the community to talk openly, looking at things like food security, land use and other issues, transport, housing, all of these things. And that's awakening people's consciousness in little ways, but the ripples are happening. So it's happening within my community, and it's a beautiful thing. And I know through that, it gives me great hope, love and trust that through this, we begin to build resilient communities who are sustainable, supportive, loving communities with a sense of responsibility and guardianship for our natural worlds. And with that, thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Imogen. Thank you, Miriam, and thank you, Chai. Right. Now we are over time. So I haven't got time for questions, but I wanted to say a few things which were in the chat, which you might not have seen. There were so many messages, how touching it was. It is so moving to hear your heartfelt connections with the tree, the land. And then it's a question, what steps do you recommend others to take to deepen their interrelationship? I mean, you have already said that already, you know, and the community idea. There was somebody else, I want to read that to you because it was really quite something what came through the chat. Big thank you, loved hearing from you all. Big thank you. Oh, no, this one. Reading about the action taken is one thing. Listening to your stories is quite another, and that's what I felt as well. And I always do when I hear people talk about, or real activists talk. You are amazing young women, and I wish you well and continued strength in the necessary work you're doing for the land and the trees. And there was a few comments like this. It's so moving to hear you. It's moving to hear your heartfelt connection. Oh my God, wait. Thank you, Miriam. Awesome courage. So many people marched at COP. What do you think we need to do now? Well, we haven't got the time. And so on and so on. So, I mean, there was a lot of amazing comments. But as we have run out of time, I want to thank you because I knew it would be awesome to have you here. And Chai, sorry Chai, more public speaking for you in future. You had everybody in tears. And that's a good outcome because we need to learn how to feel properly again. And you know what came through for me, which was amazing, because we called that kind of acts of love, rage, and courage. And what came through to me so much, the connection, you know, between you to the earth. And also, Miriam, when you talked about the evictions, I can well imagine that how horrendous that must be. Because you are there because you are connected, and it's a ripping away every time, isn't it? It must be quite horrendous. And Imogen, you know, a kind of action like just doing this by yourself with the tax, that takes a bit of courage, doesn't it? Because you were the only one, or you are on your own. It's so, I mean, I was touched, all the people were touched, and because we have run out of time, I thank you so much. One last thing, how can people reach you, or do you want us to put anything out besides of the HS2 link? What would you like? Unmute yourself, and I want you to really say that. How can people join in and get in touch? Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Just talk. I'll write it down if I can.
I just want to apologise for going off for a tangent and overrunning.
It's fine. It's fine.
Facebook is the other one. My name on Facebook is Joy Waters, but there's, if you Facebook HS2, you'll get more information about current actions and current camps. But stophs2.org is the kind of one-stop shop for HS2.
And my name is Imogen May on Facebook, and for those not on Facebook, I'm happy to put an email in the link.
Put the email in the link, Imogen.
Yeah.
Okay, so stophs2.org is for everybody, basically.
Yeah, I if anyone wants to hear my music, which is a big part of the campaign, my name is Miriam Stone, and I'm going to be releasing an album at the end of the year. So follow me on my YouTube page, and you'll be able to see a link to that.
And Miriam's music is just wonderful. We were toying with the idea of singing for you at the end of our talk, but we tried, and the lagging with the three of us in different places just didn't work. But Mims has blown people's mind with her amazing music throughout the campaign, over and over again. It's just a joy.
She does, and I have experienced her at XR in London when she suddenly started taking the mic from somebody who was bloody boring. And everybody was joining in. Yes, I remember that. She has an amazing voice. So generally speaking, the stophs2.org is also, I mean, most of you will be in the Sacred Earth Activism group. Or somebody wants you to sing, Miriam, sorry, you will have to. We all the time post about HS2 actions, so you can get it from there. Miriam, a very quick song, but very quick.
Sure. Okay, this is what we sing on the day. Can you hear me okay? So it goes. One by one, everyone comes to remember we're healing the world one heart at a time. One by one, everyone comes to remember we're saving the woods one tree at a time. One by one, everyone comes to remember we're saving the world one day at a time. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, I love your voice.
And just seeing somebody here in the background. Come on, don't hide now. There is Intra. You remember we had her at the last conference, and she was one of our really touching speakers, and I'm glad you're sitting there. Hi, Intra. You're muted. Okay, everybody, thank you ever so much. I am going to take you away from the spotlight now and do the lunch announcement. Thanks ever so much, everybody here. All three of you. Thanks, Imo. Remove spotlight. Thanks, Miriam, for the song.